Salutations viewers, my name is Game Dame and welcome back to Diablo 4. Now this is just the open beta, which is a week after the early access open beta. Now I tried my best with the time that we had to get all my characters up to 23 so I could show off the ultimates for each one. However, I fell too short before the game ended on 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So unfortunately we're going to see everyone's ultimate except for the druids, but I will explain it to you guys. So we're gonna show here, we did play as the sorcerer first, which was the first one I definitely tried out, and I really love her. I think she's a lot of fun. All my characters are women, obviously. I tried to do a rendition like me in some way, shape, or form, but we're just gonna all go to Yelesna, just because it's the easiest to get out of in order to show off like the abilities. I wanted to switch up my girls look here, but I didn't have time to do that either. So we got this. But she don't look too bad. She looks pretty. She looks pretty cool, if I say so myself. So with the sorcerer, I went a pyromancy build. Now, the pyromancy build isn't bad. It's pretty fun. I enjoy it. But it is a lot of damage over time. As you see, we have the meteor strike. Summon a meteor that strikes the target location, dealing 221 damage and burning the ground for 141 damage for over 3 seconds. Then her ultimate is Inferno, which is a really cool ultimate that she has. And that one summons a fiery serpent that continually constricts the target area, burning enemies for over 1,000 damage over 8 seconds. And it pulls in the enemies to the center repeatedly. So it's really helpful if you're with like a druid and they're able to trap them. So sorcerer plays very DPS like. You have to kind of like reposition yourself. If you guys have ever played League of Legends, you'll notice that it's a lot like an ADC. So with the meteor, it comes down just a little bit slow, but that's okay. Now with my fire shield, they can get burned. So it engulfs me for 2 seconds, burning surrounding enemies for 86 damage per second, but I'm immune for any time that is over me. We also have probably one of my favorite abilities is the Hydra. Summons a cute little Hydra. Absolutely love it. I think it's great. Oh, the barrier is part of my items that I have. And then we have the regular basic attack, the firebolt. So that one fires burning. We're going to use the ultimate here, which is so cool to see. And then this ability is called Fireball. Now the further you're away, the more damage it will do. It hurls an exploding ball of fire, dealing 248 damage to surrounding enemies. And Fireball's radius is increased based on distance traveled up to 50%. And its explosion's critical strike damage is increased by 10%. Each enemy it hits increases this bonus by 5% up to a total of 25%. Now, I do have loads of other abilities here. I was trying out a bit of the frost build, but some of this also will say this is an item contribution. So you will get abilities if you want to try it out if your items carry that. But right now we went with more of a a fire build. There is Incinerate, which is an ability I did use for quite some time, which is really helpful when you're just kind of like surrounded by enemies. Now you just shoot a beam of fire, burns enemies for 165 damage per second, and then damage per second increases over 4 seconds to 229. So the modifiers are while channeling Incinerate, you burn enemies around you for 15% of the damage per second, and every 4 seconds an enemy has been hit by Incinerate, they are immobilized for a second. So it takes a little bit to get that immobilization, but it can be very helpful. But I pretty much choose to have like the fire bolts, which pierces through enemies, and I get 2 mana when hitting a burning enemy. So I really like the sorcerer. I think the sorcerer is really strong. Obviously it's best to be with someone that can kind of take heavier damage, so that way you can do your thing. That's just kind of how the sorcerer is. We'll give one more last look-see at some of the abilities for the fire build here. Where else? And
I'm not ready yet.
Yelesna has usually pretty good amount of enemies. Yeah, right here. And then we'll just have the Hydras finish them off. So that's perfect. So that is pretty much the sorcerer. If you go the pyromancy build, obviously you can change it up to however you like and what element you like, but this is just one of the few builds that you have access to that I will be showing, because we have quite a bit to get through when it comes to all the different characters. I named them all game name, obviously for consistency. So the next one, I actually loved the Necromancer. She was an easy sorcerer to play. That's how she felt, was just a lazy sorcerer. But I loved the amount of like skeletons that follow me. So what we were here, that's right, in Sinner's Pass. We're going to transport to Yelesna just to kind of keep it consistent with location. Ooh, I had this dude try to get me, and my boys were all over that. All right. So this is my Necromancer. I actually am in love with her look. She looks just so spooky. I'm in love with the mask. It looks absolutely crazy. Got a lot of legendary items on her. But she definitely probably was the most fun I've had playing a character. Now, you get a wide variety of different types. You could go poison, you could go blood, or you could just go straight up like decompose. So I went the blight route, which is the decompose, which is a lot of fun. So you raise the skeleton, so that's summoning. So if you run out of a skeleton when you're fighting, you just go ahead and summon them. My basic attack is decompose, and 5... It generates 5 per second, tears the flesh from the enemy, dealing 122 damage per second, and forming a usable corpse with flesh every 2.5 seconds. If an enemy dies while being decomposed, I gain 10 essence. So this is the way you gain your essence back. So if I were to hit this enemy, this is what it would look like. And then Blight is basically like another fireball, but it's just a dirty fireball. It's just gross. But if you do have all your boys with you, if they're all with you, if you press 1 on a body, it does give like a slight upgrade. It looks like I do have an upgrade available. Open the Book of the Dead to select an upgrade. I'm not even sure where to... Oh, there it is. Looks like I missed out on upgrading my skeletons. Oh, I don't know if I like that. Alright, now see what happened there? Now I can raise them from the dead. I never even noticed that, actually. I just totally ignored that. Alright, so now let's go fight some enemies to raise more of the dead. So here's the Blight Ball, which does immobilize enemies. It does take a good bit of essence. So here, let me raise more of my boys from the dead. If you do see them not being summons, it's because you've switched that to no longer raise, but get an automatic like percentage, which I think this is much better to just have like your boys with you. Our second is our ultimate. So I always like to put my ultimate on 2. That's just me personally. This right here creates a bone storm, which I think is really cool. As you can see what it looks like. Just a walking tornado. Now what we have here for our curse. Every necromancer will have the ability to have a curse that they can build upon. So the curse I chose was Iron Maiden. So it curses the target area, and you can upgrade it to not take any essence. And the enemies within the area are affected by Iron Maiden take 36 damage each time they deal direct damage. So in that last 10 seconds. So if they hit you, they take 36 damage each time. So Iron Maiden I upgraded it to no longer cost essence. Instead, gave 5 essence for each enemy curse. Does not work with the enemies who are already cursed with Iron Maiden. When at least 3 enemies are afflicted by Iron Maiden, its damage is increased to 15%. This one is okay. I didn't really explore my other options because that was kind of already something I was used to. But I'm sure there are better options out there for the Necromancer. We did just get this Bone Spirit. So this is a really good clear. If you're like in a tight spot and you need to go and you're up against quite a lot of enemies or quite a lot of big enemies, the best one to use would be to use Bone Spirit. So Bone Spirit, it takes all the remaining essence that you have and then conjures a Bone Spirit that seeks an enemy, but it's only one. But when it does reach that enemy, it explodes, dealing 318 damage. And of course, this is depending on the level for the amount of damage it does to the target and all surrounding enemies, and the damage is increased by 3% for each point of essence spent casting Bone Spirit. If Bone Spirit critically strikes, its cooldown is reduced by 6 seconds. This effect can only happen once per cast, and after Bone Spirit hits an enemy, you can generate 30 essence over the next 4 seconds, which I think is pretty cool. So we're going to show it off here. With enemies that we find. Here we go. So I don't know if you guys saw that, but it pretty much made a Bone Spirits. Once it reloads, I'll show you what it actually looks like, because it looks like we got some guys here. Not that we needed to worry about them, but here's kind of what this spirit looks like. He's just like a wandering skeleton, kind of looking for an enemy, but he lasts for quite a bit, and boom goes the dynamite. He is dead as fuck. Which I do like the Blight build. I think it is really fun. Obviously, there's so many other avenues you could try. The Bone Storm definitely worked best for me, but there's multiple builds you can go with like every class. But the Blight build is what I prefer. I just need to work around it a little bit more. I did use this for quite some time before I got the Bone Tornado, which this is the Bone Prison. I do like it. I think the Bone Prison's cool. You can jump out of it, but no one else can. But it does have life on it, just like, you know, the other prisons that you get into. But overall, this build is probably one of my favorite builds. I really enjoy it. I mean, I also just enjoy the Necromancer class as a whole. I think it's very entertaining, and I don't have to worry about if I like step away from my computer for a second because my bone boys got me. Now, I forgot to tell you guys for the Sorcerer, but the Sorcerer, I mean, all around is really good. Has a little bit of trouble within mobs. The Necromancer is really good within mobs and really good against bosses in a 1v1 and the Sorcerer is too, but just a little less powerful in my opinion than the Necromancer. But that's because the Necromancer has a lot of clear and like AoE damage with all of the boys that she's able to summon, and I call them my boys. So with those two guys, I think they're both pretty hand in hand when it comes to like good all around characters or classes to use. Now we're gonna move on to the Rogue. So the Rogue, you could do 2 ways. Now I went the bow route where it's mainly focusing on bows and arrows, but I do have some like daggers in there, some way, shape, or form. I do think the daggers are probably best. So I think the Rogue is much better in a 1v1 fight rather than clearing out like a huge group. This is just my personal opinion, but it all depends which build you do. So I know that in the dagger build, you're able to do a little bit more clear. The bow builds, you can do some clear, but then you're kind of more stationary than you are with the dagger build. So with my first one, I do have Shadow Step. So Shadow Step is like my backstab, and Rogue is nice because you have that kind of versatility. So Rogue's very like back and forth. You can switch up their build, and it would probably still be pretty good. I did use Dash for a while. I thought Dash was pretty good. I didn't really try out Caltrops, but Dash is one that is really helpful for when you're trying to get away from certain enemies. You get 2 dashes when it's loaded up, and then you get also just like your step. My 2 is my Dark Shroud. I usually have my ultimate on my 2, but this one I used way too much to the point where I needed the Dark Shroud on there. So the Dark Shroud, what it does, it's pretty much, it surrounds myself with dark items that allow me to protect myself, or it does protect me. And okay, so it surrounds myself up to 5 protected shadows. I gain 8% damage reduction per active shadow. Each time you take direct damage, that damage is reduced and a shadow is consumed. For me, for my build, it actually really helped because I did find myself in situations where I was like backed up in a corner and I needed something to take that extra damage. With its modifiers, I was able to get the Dark Shroud shadows, have a 10% chance to not be consumed, and then while I have at least 2 active shadows from Dark Shroud, I gain a 10% critical strike chance. So the rogue is all about critical strike chances and just building CR. But overall, I think, as you can see with the dash, that switched up there. Like, it's not bad overall. Here, we'll actually put the caltrops in here if you guys want to see this. So I went a Frost Archer. I think the Frost Archer, I was looking for slows, looking to protect myself, and just trying to understand, like, okay, I know my limits. I know I'm not the greatest at the rogue, since it's a lot more fast-paced than what I'm used to. But it looks like we got the caltrops right here, which actually look pretty good as a slow. We're going to activate. There it is, the cool elements, the ice element that gets applied to my rogue. I still think I like the backstab the best. So that's really nice when I imbue the weapon with the cold imbuement. It gives my next 2 imbuable skills deal cold damage and chill for 25% hit. A lucky hit could for my lucky hit, sorry, the cold imbued skills have up to a 30% chance to make the enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds. And then upon my other lucky hit, critical strikes with cold imbued skills have up to a 20% chance to instantly freeze enemies for 3.17 seconds, which is a kind of a decently long time. So Frost Archer for me worked out really well. I did just get my ultimate, which is the Rain of Arrows, which I actually love. I think it is so cool to look at. And we're going to need like a good amount of people here. So that is my Wave of Arrows, which is really good for AoE. That I really like it. It really, really was nice there. I love it. It's such a long cooldown. It's 60 seconds, but it goes over it 2 times, dealing 392 damage. Now for my basic, I did Heartseeker. So as you can see, it ricocheted quite a bit. I need to find some enemies. Come on out, enemies. Yes, Surrogate's Passage. Perfect. We'll find some enemies in here. Oh. This is an event. Alright. This is the perfect time to show off the rogue skills. So as you can see, it ricochets in like a triangle. If it doesn't hit other enemies. If it hits just the one, it will come back around as you see right here. Now for my other basic, I chose the rapid fire. Now the downside to rapid fire is it shoots twice, and if you choose to not be there when it shoots a second time, it'll just shoot blanks, which is actually kind of shitty. But here we are seeing the rogue at its finest with better ability to later down the line. It's definitely harder earlier game when you're fighting to just give it that look and feel of just showing what the rogue can actually do. Now you have to dodge quite a bit with the rogue because of you don't have a lot of AoE. again, the rogue is a lot more singular of a kind of character rather than doing a lot more AoE damage. Now, there's, of course, poison and I think there was like one other poison. And I think, oh, like more bleed or something like that. But obviously, I'm just showing a little bit what it had. I'm not going to pursue that whole event right there because that will take me a little bit. But I think Rogue is good, especially if you're playing with more of a like a supporty tank, like a barbarian or a druid. That way, the druid could like, or just the tank in general could take more of the damage. Now, if you want to go high DPS, then I think this would pair really well with the necromancer and or the sorcerer. So Rogue, I feel like, is very good in more of a group setting. But I also am doing the bow and arrow build, so it's probably a lot better with the dagger build because of its maneuverability, because the arrow build feels a lot more stationary, especially with your basic attacks on what you choose. Now, there's definitely other basic attacks. I've tried flurry. You still stationary, and it goes kind of like back and forth. But I think overall, Rogue is fun. Not my favorites, but also it's very situational, and you have to be really aware of your surroundings for at least like what I believe the Rogue is. And that's just how I've been playing the Rogue. But the Rogue in general, because you go and you deal a lot of damage and then you dip out. So you have to kite a lot. Now we have the barbarian. Now the barbarian, I will say, is probably my least favorite class right now, because it feels really weak at the beginning. It could potentially pop off for later, but I think the barbarian just feels pretty weak. So we're going to show off her abilities. I went for what I like to call the Scream and Shout build. So I did Rallying Cry, which makes me really fucking fast. And then the War Cry, which adds more onto my Fury. So now you can see that I just dealt a lot of damage there, which was really cool. But the Rallying Cry has a cooldown of 25 seconds. And increases my movement speed by 30% and resource generation by 50% for 6.6 seconds, and nearby allies for 3.3 seconds. I think, again, the druid and the barbarian are really good in group settings. They're kind of hard by yourself, especially if you're 1v1ing. But they definitely shine more against groups than they do more in a 1v1 battle against a boss. I definitely have struggled more with a barbarian and a druid in a boss battle rather than sorcerer, necromancer, and even the ranger. Well, I'm forgetting it's not ranger, it's something else. Literally just went over it. But this Rallying Cry gives you unstoppable while active, which is really nice, so that way nothing can stop you, hence the name Unstoppable. But Rallying Cry grants me, based off the modifier, 10% basic life as Fortify while Rallying Cry is active. It gives me an additional 2% base life, as Fortify each time gives me deal or direct damage. Now, Fortify is characters take 10% reduced damage. You become fortified when you have more Fortify than your current life. And this can be really helpful if you are trying to build tankier and trying to be like more of the front runner person in your team, which is what barbarian and druid is. So for War Cry, another shout. So you bellow out a mighty war cry, increasing your damage dealt by 18%, which is really big, for 8.8 seconds, and nearby allies for 4.4 seconds. Again, really good for group settings. It grants me Berserkering, which grants a 25% damage increase, as well as 15% increase in movement speed, and it lasts up to 5 seconds. And if at least 6 enemies are nearby when I cast War Cry, my damage bonus is increased to 30%, and that's just how the barbarian works. Now, this is my basic attack. I am dual wielding, not using two, because I'm not using a a two-handed weapon. I'm dual wielding two swords or maces, or you guys know what I mean. So it unleashes a rapid flurry of blows. That's because I went with the frenzy build. The frenzy build I thought was really fun. because it allows me to just go kind of fucking nuts, just kind of get in there and deal a lot of bleed. Now, if Frenzy hits an enemy, its attack speed is increased by 20% for 3 seconds up to 60%. And then while Frenzy is granting 60% bonus attack speed, it also generates 2 additional Fury, which is really good. But while Berserkering, and Berserkering it means you gain a 25% increased damage and 15% increased movement speed, and it lasts up to 5 seconds. I gain other skills but with a 5% attack stack for each Frenzy that I have. So the Frenzy is really helpful when I have the Scream and Shout combo fucking going off here, because that shit actually gets so goddamn broken. So we're going to go back in here. But we're going to kind of talk about the other ones that I have here. So my other basic attack is Rend. So I cleave enemies, and multiple enemies at once. It deals bleed. So you'll notice that when I do go in and I cleave them, you'll see that there's no longer a bright red, but like a dark red, but it's slowly depleting. So that's the bleeding effect taking that damage in over 5 seconds. And it's 431 bleeding damage for the current build that I have. The modifiers, I'm dealing direct damage with Rend, extends the duration of vulnerable on enemies by 2 seconds. And then the direct damage with Rend grants 4 Fury per enemy hit, up to a maximum of 20 Fury, which is pretty nuts. And then probably one of my favorite abilities is called Death Blow. So this is a weapon mastery. I whip out my fucking axe, and upon killing the enemy, it resets, which means I could just kill a line of enemies and continuously reset. But you have to time that with tankier enemies, because then you'll have to wait 15 seconds and you can't continuously kill them. So looks like this person just did this event. Unfortunately can't show it, but we'll go through this here. We'll have to hit like another part of Yelesna to kind of show off the ability here. All right, we are out of town, so I'm gonna boost up my character. And oh look, we got some boys here. Resets did not reset, so that is something that will not reset. And now we have to wait a certain amount of time, which is unfortunate, but they are very explosive. Now here is my ultimate, where I can just get a bunch of boys coming in to help me out. They follow me for a certain amount of time, which I really like this ultimate. I just got it, and sometimes I'm in a pickle and very much need help. But as you guys can see, my cleave just keeps resetting with those low health enemies, which really helps clear it out. But this a lot more directional than I would say the druid. The druid is able to do a lot more AoE, which we'll see next. But now we have kind of just showing off the cleave a little bit. So you see how they kind of just slowly bleed out. And there you have it. That is the barbarian, at least the build I'm going for. I call it the Scream and Shout builds, because it builds upon my barbarian's already base stats and then just heightens them by a percentage. And then we call upon 3 ancients to aid me in battle for 6 seconds, and each of them have their own ability. So Korlik leaps the enemy, dealing 425 damage, swings his weapon in a frenzy, dealing 159 damage per hit. Talik spins in a whirlwind, rapidly attacking enemies for 265 damage, and I don't know how to Matawik upheaves the ground, dealing 797 damage. So I really want to see that in a fight, because I actually just got it before I had to move on to the druid. So let's go ahead here and then see. Oh yeah, that is just disgusting. Disgusting ultimate. Very good for barbarian, especially if you're in a tight squeeze. Barbarian is good by itself to an extent, but it thrives a lot better within a party. Especially since mine definitely seems more of like a support barbarian build with all of the added stuff that I have, not only for me, but for my nearby allies as well. It is helpful. It is a good build, but You got to be careful because Barbarian is the only one where it has its like skill or like pool called Fury Drain. The others do not drain. This is the only one that does drain if you aren't consistently hitting something, which you got to do with your basic attack. And just keep that in mind if you're out of Fury. Obviously, like the other ones, you always just got to watch out for the pool that you have of Essence, Fury, whatever else they call it. Now, this is a druid. I'm sad I did not get it up to level 23. Did not have the time. I was like 2 levels away, and it takes literally like 3 hours to level up twice. Not 3 hours. That's too long. Maybe at least like another hour, which I did not have because it ended today at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, I do like my druid build. The druid build, I call it Mother Bear. And I did the werebear build pretty much. I don't mind it. I definitely feel very supporty, but I am a tank. I am definitely a huge tank. So I chose again werebear. So the first one is a roar, which makes me shapeshift into a werebear, and I roar out to nearby enemies, dealing that reduces their damage by 50% for 4 seconds, which is really helpful if you're in a tight bind. It also fortifies me for 22% base life, and it also slows enemy by 40% for its duration. Now, that is really good, especially when I'm using my basics, Maul and Pulverize. Now, Maul is very slow slap, like a little bear slap, that does deal 107 damage, but if the enemy is hit by Maul, it fortifies me for 2% of my base life and increases the range of radius of Maul by 30%, which is really nice for me because that way I can just slap enemies even farther away. But Pulverize is really where my build shines. So if I'm able to reduce that damage and grasp them in the vines, I'm able to hold on to them and put them in a certain spot and immobilize them for a certain amount of time while dealing poison damage. So my build is very much centered around Pulverize. It's all about that setup, but obviously I can't just rely on that, especially if I'm out. So I'll just show you guys that combo here so you guys can see how that it affects them. And now I'm going to put the vines on them. I'm going to hit them and then Pulverize for 3 times. If your Pulverize hits 10 stacks, that's when it overpowers. Now, the overpower deals bonus damage based on the sum of my current life and fortified life. I could go up to a group of enemies and very much just... Do not have enough spirit. Oh, yeah, here's the spirit. Just completely annihilate them. Now, the druid is very, very mana hungry. That is something I very much noticed when I was doing this build. Let's reduce their damage, trap them, and let's hit this tree with our trample. Now, my trample is pretty good, especially if I want to knock back enemies. Obviously, that didn't knock back the enemy there, but it makes me unstoppable and shapeshifts me into a werebear, and I charge forward, dealing 100x amount of damage. And enemies who are knocked back, taken into terrain, which is what I really try to set up, get an additional 207 damage and are stunned for 3 seconds. My trample does deal 30% bonus damage, and this bonus is reduced by 15% for each enemy hit on the hit after the first. So when I trample, I like to trample, sometimes Vine Creeper or do vice versa. Both work, but I always try to initiate Debilitating Roar first. This next build, Hurricane, is more so for like magic druid users, but I was able to get this because of an item, and it's been really helpful, especially when I've been in a tight bind. So pretty much it just summons a storm around me, and then I just pulverize my enemies. But as you can see, the hits are really, really slow, but when you get up to the pulverize, it does really help when building those stacks. I wish I had an ultimate to show you guys, but I'll just show you the full front of what I've been using pretty much with this build.
I need more spirit.
So that's been pretty much my druid. I would have really loved to have grabbed. I was literally just like 2 away from getting it, and I was going to pick Grizzly Rage, which would have changed me into a dire werebear for 10 seconds, gaining 20% bonus damage and 20% damage reduction. And then that damage bonus is increased by 3% each second while in this form. And the kills extend to the duration by 1 second up to 10 additional seconds. And unfortunately, that is just how it is. It takes you up to at least level 23 to get your ultimate, is what I found out. I thought it was like level 15 or 16, so I was like upgrading my people until that point, but that is not the case. You have to get up to at least level 23 to unlock your ultimate ability. And then I would highly recommend upgrading all of like your base and like side modifiers, stuff like here, predatory instinct, like rank 3 out of 3, your critical chance when you're close to an enemy, because there were some cases where as a druid, again, just like the barbarian, even if it was a 1v1 battle against a boss, I had a very hard time, and it took me, I think, twice as long than rogue, sorcerer, and necromancer to kill off the enemy. But I am a lot tankier, which definitely gave me the ability to take, you know, front the damage a little bit more, and I'd be okay. But you're not able to dish out as much damage unless, like, obviously it depends on your builds. I do know that since I went werebear, I went tankier. I do know that if you go werewolf, you'll probably dish out a lot more damage than the werebear does. But obviously that is up to you guys when you build your character. Now, I wish I was able to show off the ultimate ability. Unfortunately, again, I was not. But there's a lot of great classes here. I would have to say, again, my least favorite right now is barbarian, but it could pop off. But I'd probably say necromancer, sorcerer, druid, rogue, then barbarian. And I can go back and forth between the druid and rogue. I feel like I need to try a different build with the rogue in order to build exactly kind of like what I want to build the most optimal damage. But that's why they have up to 10 slots for you guys to use. I use 5 of my slots to create 1 of each character for you guys, and I really put in the work for all of them, because levels 15 and up is when the grind starts to become unreal, and you really just need to follow the main story quest to get a lot of those points, XP points, to level up a lot quicker. I hope you guys enjoyed my builds. It is 1 of each that I tried to show. I wasn't going to try to do multiple because that would take too much time. But the cool thing is you are able to create your character in a certain way and kind of show off how they look at your home base. You can change the look and like stay with like certain looking items. You don't have to constantly change them. But it was very fun. I had a lot of fun in this open beta for Diablo 4. I cannot wait till the full game comes out. I definitely know the fucking first part by heart now at this point. It is absolutely ridiculous because I literally went through it like 5 times. Let me know in the comments down below what build you guys went with and who your favorite character is. Again, mine is the Necromancer. I think Necromancer and Sorcerer are all around probably the best characters in the game, just based off of their versatility. I think Rogue could be good depending on how your playstyle is. I think that the dagger build might be better than the arrow builds, but I do think that Druid and Barbarian is much better in a team aspect rather than by yourself. But obviously they do have some strengths, but we don't know because this is just the first part, because all characters are up to change depending on where you are in the story. They could be stronger or weaker depending where you go, because not every character is going to be good at every point in the game, and that is something we have to keep in mind. But in the earlier part, it definitely feels like Necromancer and Sorcerer and Rogue are definitely more top tier, and then Barbarian and Druid are more bottom tier. But they could pick up later in the game, late game. They could be insanely fucking strong, but we will have to see when the full game comes out. Let me know in your comments. Let me know what you guys think of my video in the comments down below. If you guys want similar builds, or you know, if you want a slightly different build, and I would love to hear about what you guys did, because Diablo 4 is going to be such an amazing game. I've poured hours and hours into this shit already, and I'm absolutely obsessed with it. But that is all the time I have for you guys today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I highly appreciate your time as always. But please do not forget to subscribe and follow, not only to my YouTube, but to my Twitch. You guys know where my YouTube is at. You can find my Twitch at twitch.tv/thegamedame. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.